Hi, everyone. I will begin this study session of the HPC. We'll open the meeting at 6:32. We have a few things on the agenda tonight. So Sarah, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, so we just have a few kind of informational items and then we'll get into the survey plan kind of kickoff tonight. But I have Rachel here tonight with economic development. If you want to go and get started, she'll be talking about some grants.
Sure, and thanks for having me tonight. I'm Rachel King, I'm the Economic Development Director. And I just joined the team at the end of October 2024, so it was good timing for this program to wrap up the application period and for us to get those awards done. But we wanted to make sure to circle back with this group in particular to give you an idea of kind of the run of this grant program as well as the results of it and give you some examples of how the money was used. Keep in mind as well, I am pinch hitting tonight for a member of my team, Jamie Kraut, who is out of town and couldn't make the presentation. So I will do my best with all of your questions, but if you have some hard ones for me, I might have to run back and give you some responses later. So tonight we are talking about our COVID recovery grant for historic building improvement. And this funding was really as a result, obviously, of COVID-19. So the eligibility for this grant was focused on those businesses that are responding to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19 or its negative economic impacts. So that was really the key aspect of those dollars that the team focused on. This was, again, limited to businesses or owners in the downtown historic district boundary. And the projects were able to be awarded up to 80% of their eligible project costs. So examples of eligible improvements for the program are interior work for an existing property, building modifications for new users if there are vacancies that we were trying to fill, physical exchanges to exterior, so facade improvements. And then there was still some wiggle room for folks that didn't quite fit one of those buckets, and we accepted applications for other projects and allowed folks to explain that.
And Rachel, this
Yes.
was all federal, right? This was federal legislation, federal funding. These were not local dollars.
Correct. These were ARPA dollars. Yes. Okay, that worked. Weren't quite sure if it would. So yes, this was $450,000 of the ARPA funding. And of that, we were able to spend $438,548 to be precise, to distribute to those approved projects. That funding then stimulated roughly $3 million in private investment from community members. Out of the 11 applications that were received, the team was able to approve 9 of those. It's a really successful approval rate. This is the short list of organizations that received funding. You can see the award amount there, but also the estimated project cost as estimated at by the business at the time of application, either the business or the property owner. So that's where that $3 million private investment comes from, but then you can see the individual awards here. But of course, nothing quite tells the story of these as well as the pictures do. So we wanted to show you a few of the uses for those grant dollars. So this is the alley, and before COVID, the owner intended to use this back room for a banquet room, but that didn't play out. So this was built into a full kitchen in the vacant space, and then operating their kitchen, or they were operating their kitchen in a food truck behind the building at the time. So the first step in the project was to include a grease trap, which is very critical for restaurant operations, but something not quite thought about and something that's not always eligible for funding. So the owner continued to work through the kitchen in different phases, but then the unique And fun thing about this particular grant is that it actually ended up helping 2 businesses at the time, because the Old Town Tavern was able to use the grease shop as well. The next one is for Graham Properties. This was a vacant building that was formerly used as a print shop. And as we all know, it's now Black House to provide better use of the site. So that's that great renovation that we see there on the right. Denver Beer Company, they created a great outdoor space that activates a really primary and visible corner there on Main Street. The project included new architecture and design to the existing building, improvements to the facade there. And it included a commercial kitchen to be added to the current brewing space in the building. New finishes for the interior bar and seating area, and men and women's restrooms modified as required per our building codes. And the facade improvements here included some additional windows, the overhead and structural changes to provide some shape and additional weather protections. And that covered about 2,400 square feet of interior space. The next one is Creative Littleton. So this is a really nice, mostly exterior project. So this included brick restoration, new windows, front garage door replacement, exterior door replacement, a new sewer line, creation of a shoring plan, exterior mural, foundation, steel structure, HVAC, stairs, railing, lighting, plumbing, siding, etc. So this was a huge lift by the developer on this building, and you can see the nice before and after there. So that was on Curtis. This property on Alamo took a hit during COVID when the retail store leasing the building had to make modifications to meet social distancing requirements. So they had to move the store outside partially for proper distancing. So there was significant damage to the property inside and out that needed repair there. So repairs here included the fence that you can see, that black wrought iron lining the property, some of the landscaping and sod work there, inside repairs, paint, electric and lighting, and then some other ancillary projects as well for dumpsters and concrete repair and things like that. So those are just a few highlights of the projects that were funded. We did want to take a second to advertise our incentive report from 2024 that has a lot more information about some of the incentives and grants that were provided in 2024, and that's available on the website or through that QR code that you see there. And that's our presentation for this evening. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll try my best to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Did all of these fit into, I'm actually just curious, but did all of these fit into those 3 or 4 examples, or there was a catch-all below? And I was wondering how they were scattered.
The eligibility criteria, is that what you're referring to? Let's see if we can go back here. These
Yes.
3 right here.
That's right, yeah.
That is a great question. My understanding is that they did. I don't recall, because we received a summary of this from staff as well, and there wasn't a call out for any unique circumstances that did not fit criteria.
Well, neat projects.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we did COAs on a couple of these properties.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that, the Creative
Yeah.
Littleton one, the brick one, I've been waiting
brewery.
to kind of see come to fruition, so. Uh-huh,
I didn't get to vote on
yes.
that, but it came.
Yeah, I believe the event to Creative Littleton one is
Oh, and
fully
that-
complete, so that mural is super cool. It's on the side there. That was before my time. Great job, guys.
Great, well, thank you. It's
Thank
great
you
to
for having
see it
me.
all, yep, see it all put together.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. So moving right along, our next topic is downtown Littleton's Northern Gateway and Geneva Village presentation.
Do you mind if I sit here so I can drive? You don't have to move. I'll just shift a little.
Oh, hi, Julie. I can also shift.
For the,
I'm good.
okay.
Thank you, though.
Use my
So many friends.
glasses. All right. Now that we've done the whole change up, right? So good evening, members of the Historical Preservation Commission. My name's Kathleen Osher. I'm Deputy City Manager here at the City of Littleton. I was just thinking, like, I did so much work with you when you were still Historical Preservation Board and then haven't overlapped with many members since then. I think that our last big work together would have been the historic district in downtown. And so it's fun to be back in front of you. I think the only member that's probably overlapped with that work is Kim Fields. And so it's also great to see so much new energy on the commission now, so. And Amy
too.
oh, sorry, Amy.
I think my first meeting was maybe the last wrap up of that, so,
I think
Yeah.
you were coming on.
yeah. And maybe Jason too, because I think we
It's very
started around the same time, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it
we're
will.
at the same time.
So Jason and I had another fun adventure together.
Talking about Lyft?
Yeah.
Yes, I enjoyed Lyft.
Yeah, I did too.
The
So
only
it was
person
like
in the
my-
city.
No, I enjoyed all that work too,
Thank you
so,
very much.
yeah. Okay, so this evening, we just are gonna kind of run through and share an update. So I would say the point of tonight is we really just wanna inform you about an upcoming effort for the city. And I just wanna be clear, while this is information at this point, what we are looking to do is engage 2 members of the HPC to serve as part of this process. And then moving forward, there's a lot of work left to do on Geneva Village and, downtown's Northern Gateway. So there are a number of steps, similar to how we've done work on Project Downtown or, as we look forward to Littleton Boulevard, some of that visioning work and really much, much deeper planning work. So this is not that. And the way that we do community engagement with projects like that is a very different process and that is yet to come. So I just want to make sure that that's understood clear from the front. And then I really want to have an opportunity to share some of the history of how we ended up here and the emphasis that has been on downtown, as well as kind of take you through some of that steps. And then I'm going to invite Julie Latham, our housing policy analyst, to talk about Geneva Village specifically. And then we'll kind of round out with talking about the technical advisory panel. So this is the preview. You're seeing it before council. So we're in front of council with a similar presentation on March 25th. And then we're also sharing information with our Littleton Downtown Development Authority later this week on Wednesday evening. So you're our trial run. Be kind. No, I'm just kidding. So as we go through and just kind of talk about, downtown has been a major emphasis for the city all the way through some of our long-range planning. So as we began to do the Envision Littleton Comprehensive and Transportation Master Plans, we started that process in 2019 with almost an 8-month focus on just vision. And we were really after a unifying vision. What were the things that the city really agreed on were important, and hopefully trying to uncover some of the shared values that existed in the city. It was an interesting political moment. I did have people tell me, there's no way that anyone in Littleton agrees on anything, so good luck. And I said, well, I take that challenge, accepted. But through that 8 months, it was a great opportunity to learn more about what people really valued in the city. And I would say, if you were to read that vision plan, it comes across pretty clearly right from the onset. The 3 things that were really prioritized as part of that vision were, our beautiful river, the South Platte River, and then really that Highline Canal, the trails that we saw, but we also saw a huge emphasis on downtown. And as a result, much of our planning efforts kind of kept that in the forefront. And so as we went through, even Rachel and her team, which is presented, the economic development team, they've gone through a comprehensive economic development strategy. Last year, downtown continues to be an incredible point of emphasis. You'll see, in our strategic plan, mention of downtown as well. So all of those efforts have been ongoing, for many, many years. But I think it was very clear in our work in 2019 that a lot of people really do identify with those major priorities of the river and downtown. And so obviously that evolves as time goes on, but that sort of set the stage for how we started to approach some of the next steps with downtown. COVID hit downtown pretty hard, and the changes and restrictions of how people could dine or recreate or hang out really impacted businesses down there. And as a result, property owners and businesses really did come together and approach the city about, what are some of the tools that we need to have in place to make sure that our downtown can stay thriving. So they pulled in some residents as well and came to us with a steering committee and basically providing a reality check on what's happening in downtown and how that could move forward. And so as they went through that process, we engaged a consultant to help them think through a feasibility study. Is there a way for downtown to organize itself so that you're able to really kind of see that long-term future for the area? And so that new organization became part of a study. We looked at two different tools, a business improvement district and a downtown development authority. So as we went through that process, we really took on a number of different objectives, trying to understand those market dynamics. Really, could a new district be the best tool to respond to downtown challenges and then future opportunities? How could that investment be really thought through? What would the funding mechanisms for a new entity or district look like? Pros and cons, and then really try and engage with a wide variety of stakeholders as well. And then obviously the feasibility study was designed so that at the end of it you could say, what's the best one, and where are we finding consensus with property owners and businesses in particular? For the most part, when you look at those tools, a business improvement district or a downtown development authority, it is property owners and businesses taxing themselves to create a set of resources that then can be redeployed for the benefit of the district. And so having that conversation was very important for one, them to initiate that, which the city was happy to be in that supportive role, and then for them to move forward with the next steps. So they did decide to really pursue a downtown development authority. And so it's basically a tool within state legislature that really does focus on that vitality and attractiveness of downtown. It creates a different set of funding mechanisms. So it's tax increment finance. So basically you set a base year. So this is the amount of taxes that have been collected, and then anything that grows above can be captured by the district to help support programs and initiatives within the district. There is also an opportunity through a downtown development authority to collect mill levy. So those are additional property taxes, and so at that point in time, state legislature governs that can only be up to 5 mills of property tax. So the group working together, that's a really hard one, right? Like property taxes are very high, particularly on commercial properties, but it gave them some extra latitude and really tools to help support the formation of a district, and then it's also growth. So they decided to collect 3 mills of property tax after their formation. So what is necessary to form a downtown development authority is you have to have a plan of development, which is kind of a weird term for it because it really is a plan designed to help think through the programs, services, and maybe investments that can help support the district. So that authority was formed in 2002. It's basically a vote of everyone that lives within the district. It's sort of an oddball type of election, but I will say I still think it is the highest voter turnout of any of the DDAs that have been considered in the state. So a tremendous job from stakeholders, businesses, and property owners to make sure that people knew what was going on. Obviously, we have heard from people, like, it is an oddball one, so, right, did everyone know at every point in time? I think the district works really hard now to make sure that communication has increased and improved, particularly with residents that live in the district. So the DDA, you can see the boundaries here. What was interesting in their plan of development is that they identified with this idea of gateways. And so the Riverside being a gateway and kind of reconnecting our downtown with the river. My understanding is that the waters of the river used to flow right up to what is now the Melting Pot or the Carnegie Library. Obviously, with the flood in the late 60s, the river alignment changed somewhat, but that connection between downtown and the river remains very strong. And so really looking at an opportunity to provide a greater level of connection. I mean, Santa Fe is no small boundary or dividing line, right? But really making sure that there was emphasis there. The South Gateway, which is mostly made up of the community college, which I don't know if any of you have dealt with the governance of a community college, super interesting, but there's a lot involved in them being able to say, yes, we want to be part of this district. So that was incredibly encouraging, I know, to everyone that worked on the feasibility study. That core downtown area, which includes the historic district and the gateway that stretches across the railroad tracks and goes to, why can't I think of the street? Crocker, thank you. No problem, takes a team. And then the Northern Gateway, which is kind of what we want to focus on tonight. So that's that corridor of Prince, basically, that takes us all the way up to where Santa Fe connects into Prince Street on the north side there.
What's the story behind Old Town being not part of it?
So it's interesting, DDAs, particularly as a tool, are really focused more on commercial areas. And so it's highly residential. And so our consultant team really called that out and said, it's hard to provide services that are meaningful to highly residential areas of a downtown. Probably one of the most successful things that the DDA has done in that core area is that they are pulling resources to be able to shovel streets along Main and Alamo. And they're looking to expand that program. As you can imagine, Mother Nature doesn't always play fair. So it can get really costly depending on the type of winter that we have, but they've been able to provide that service. The other thing they're also doing is a lot of street cleaning. So they'll do power washing of the sidewalks and streets and graffiti removal if there is, or gum removal. It's amazing where they find gum. The company they work with logs all of these things, so it's like a really, I guess, interesting take on data analysis, right, when you can see at that level of detail the work that they're doing. But the goals that they identified as part of that were these 5 goals, sort of that beautiful and welcoming, well-connected, which has a lot to do with infrastructure and other connection points, clean and safe, obviously some of the ones that I just covered are huge programming areas for that, and really recognizing that improved parking, both options and kind of overall experience. It really does look like a lot of effort to educate people about what the choices are for parking, because there are parking choices, even though sometimes what you hear is downtown is a bear to find a place to park your car. And then the last piece being that business friendly and vibrant. So in conjunction with this effort, and then having an entity in place that could really be more of a collective voice for downtown, that was really an important tool for the city to do some other long-range planning for downtown. So hopefully some of you may be familiar with our effort called Project Downtown, but the emphasis was really to try and understand what was necessary for future infrastructure. In many ways, you create a DDA, a Downtown Development Authority, because they're going to have that emphasis of really activating a downtown and kind of doing beyond that base level of service, really kind of managing towards those details. So in a lot of ways, I always think of this piece and the infrastructure work as kind of setting a stage. And they really get that performance, but that stage has to be sound, right? You don't want it too old or too falling apart, or any of the challenges that you may have relative to infrastructure. So when we started the project downtown purpose, or the plan, that purpose was really about mobility, how people are getting to and through and around downtown. Obviously, the placemaking pieces that are so important and signal that this is a special place and a place that really has emphasis for people that are kind of slowing down. A lot of my placemaking experience comes from getting to work closely with Jan Gehl from Copenhagen, Denmark, who's probably one of the world's gurus in placemaking. And, he always said, you have to be careful about what you invite people to do. And this should really be, at about 3 miles per hour. So you should see signals and feel welcome to travel at that slow speed. So it really is a great emphasis on pedestrians and oftentimes cyclists as well that are connecting. Streetscape improvements, obviously that coupled together with green infrastructure, it's hard to watch a whole set of trees that are the same species fall victim to the same fungus and then all be lost at the same time. So there are better ways to obviously support trees in a more urban type environment, a more pedestrian focused environment. That can be really, really hard on trees. I know our city council just toured the 16th Street Mall over on Friday. And it's really interesting, the infrastructure that they've built for just to support those trees. I think what I learned that I thought was the coolest on that tour was that they're creating these tree boxes, right, to support the life of the trees, but it's also so that the trees can talk to each other. Which when I say that, then people nod their heads like, yeah, trees gotta talk. And I was like, I learned that. So how did I miss that in life? But yeah. So, but really creating some of that infrastructure to help support trees and other greenery and other opportunities for people to have sort of those additional elements as well. And so this project was really in close cooperation with the DDA and really using that tool of sort of a unified voice along with other stakeholders. But it really did help and speak to the plan of development that the DDA had adopted. That's kind of a 30-year plan for downtown. So as we did that, we really wanted to make sure that this vision amplified what they were trying to do with their plan of development. So the vision plan was adopted just in November and really does call for its first priority as a set of investments along Main Street, sort of a curdless solution, but also allows for a greater level of activation. I think we always get the question, why can't we string some lights like other cool little walking streets, or if you've ever been to lower downtown in Denver, where there is just that sort of the way you can use both green and lights and really engage people in lingering, which, obviously is a huge part of them spending and providing revenues for the city, because we are hugely dependent on sales tax revenue as part of our overall budget. So with that, there's also future investments that are identified that include a vision for Prince Street with a dedicated bike lane. And so this that connection of creating sort of that vibrancy between the Northern Gateway and then into Main Street, I just wanted to kind of share that piece as well. And so now we're going to talk specifically about Geneva Village, and then we're going to share a little bit about what we anticipate with the technical advisory panel and kind of work with Sarah to identify some folks that can help us.
Okay, so I am going to talk a little bit about the history of Geneva Village and the site, as well as a bit of a brief history of the council discussions surrounding the site and the decisions that have been made as a result. So the International Geneva Association purchased the site in 1927 to create a retreat and care facility for former hospitality employees. Then in 1967, they built Geneva Village, which is 28 apartments that were designed by Eugene Sternberg that were built for retired married members of their association. The lodge was more intended for single men, and then as times changed in the 1960s, realized they needed some space for families to come live and occupy.
So the white building is what is referred to as the lodge?
Geneva Lodge. And then the 28 apartments I'm referring to as Geneva Village. So Sternberg is
Not
the
that.
apartments,
Yeah.
right, yes.
But
Wrong-
super-
Wrong era, yes.
Yeah, and super interesting that, you know, how much the kitchen changed, right? Like the level of automation meant you had time to have a wife, right? Because if you were, especially if you were in the culinary arts, like it was so all consuming for life that family life kind of took a back seat for most chefs. And so it's kind of interesting how just in that short space of time.
So then moving on to just the overall property. The overall property is 5 parcels. It was purchased by the city in 1975 as part of the overall land purchase for the new city center, city administration building. The apartments ultimately ended up not being needed for the development of the city center, so they remained on site, and management of them was transferred to Littleton's Housing Authority or South Metro Housing Options. They managed the properties until 2018. The Geneva Village apartments are not historically designated, but the site is eligible. The lodge is designated. So City Council in 2022 started considering potential options and alternatives for the site. They took the time and they and staff went through a lengthy review of multiple considerations. You can see from the list up here, there's a lot to balance with this site between the residents, the historic architecture, the potential for future development and more affordable housing, and also just what is prudent stewardship of the property. So taking a look and spending time doing that in 2022 and 2023, after all that careful consideration, council ultimately directed staff to chart a course to redevelop the property in support of the city's goals, utilizing the principles that are outlined here, in supporting the Northern Gateway, looking at majority affordable residential uses, making sure to incorporate some of the important Eugene Sternberg historic design principles, as well as the integration of rental and for sale, and then also looking at that connectivity through downtown and the amenities and partnership with private ownership and the Littleton Downtown Development Authority. The timeline of these conversations is outlined here. You can see where council started these discussions. Council provided direction. I will touch upon the Historic Preservation Board discussion that occurred in April. I know some of you were a part of. And then also in 2023 and 24, updates provided to council and some of the resident relocation support services that were offered. And then in November of 2024, when we submitted our Urban Land Institute Technical Advisory Panel application, which I will be shortening to the ULI TAP because that is a mouthful from here on. So going back to the presentation in April of 2023, the Historic Preservation Board heard a presentation about Eugene Sternberg's career and then had a discussion about the historic attributes and the unique elements of the Geneva Village site. And they provided feedback that, you know, this is an example of one of Sternberg's work that is mostly unaltered and is a clear example of the values and principles that motivated him throughout his career, which included creating accessible living spaces that emphasize community and directly engage open space. So, as mentioned, the city submitted an application for ULI's Technical Advisory Panel on November 1st, and the city was selected in January as a recipient of that Technical Advisory Panel to explore revitalization efforts for downtown Littleton's Northern Gateway, which includes the Geneva Village site. The Technical Advisory Panel is comprised of members of ULI Colorado who have expertise and experience in a lot of different relevant areas and have that expertise to kind of address really difficult real estate and land use challenges. It's really a process to help brainstorm potential opportunities and also potentially to provide some recommendations to inform the next steps in both the short and long term. This is a map outlining the core study area that was identified as part of the application. It was segmented into 3 tiers for review. Tier 1 is the blue on this map, and that includes the Geneva Village apartments. The green portion of this map is Tier 2, and that includes the other city-owned properties, including the City Center, the Geneva Lodge, Geneva Park, and Geneva Lake. The pink areas on the map are identified as Tier 3, and those are included because there are other areas of influence for the Northern Gateway and include potential opportunities for connectivity and enhancements. And they're also, influence the site area. And these are the next steps. As Kathleen mentioned, there's a presentation to the LDDA on Wednesday and a council presentation where the executive director of ULI Colorado will be presenting to city council at their study session on March 25th. We're anticipating outreach to property owners will kick off in April and run through May. And the TAP right now is scheduled for May 21st through 22nd. And we are still working through and finalizing some of these details and items with more information to follow. And I know conversation around what that might look like.
When you mentioned property owners, you're talking about in the surrounding
Yes.
areas, so, because the city owns.
Yeah.
No, yeah. We will not just be talking to ourselves, yes.
So when you think about it, it's mostly those pink areas where they're, predominantly the county there to the north and then private ownership to the west.
And are you aware whether the city, I mean, this is a jewel of a bunch of real estate. Are you aware whether the city wants to maintain control over this land?
I think we're at the point where council is interested in the next evolution. I think there are a lot, like the next evolution of Geneva Village, right? So what does the future look like? So they've said we're open to redevelopment.
Okay.
So if that's the case, what are some of the things that we should be considering? Because redevelopment doesn't have to mean that we lose all of the units of Geneva Village. Redevelopment could mean that there's some combination of considerations. So I think they really are using this as a brainstorming opportunity. So what comes out of a ULI TAP is a series of recommendations. So this panel, it's very fast and furious. This panel comes together, makes a set of recommendations, produces a report that then I think we as a city can use to do some of that next deeper level of engagement. Because I think this is small and concentrated, which maybe there might be some great ideas in there that are worth having a greater conversation, particularly with those property owners and others. Because we see that too, right? Like that there's some underperforming retail that is right at the northern gateway. So is there a better opportunity there? And if there's no denying that when public sector makes investments, sometimes that can catalyze private investment as well and can signal sort of that next iteration and next evolution of a place. So I think we also want to be really cognizant of the historic preservation components of that. So how do you do that? There's also an affordable housing. While this never had an income requirement or an income cap, it represented senior housing that was deeply affordable. Like rents really hadn't been raised since the 70s. So deeply, deeply affordable and all home to senior women. And so we've been really focused over the last year and this year with finding a good transition and relocation for all residents. So we've been successful with relocating all of the residents. We have one remaining resident, which, council had said, let's keep residential operations through the end of 2025. So we're working very closely with her and her family to find a good relocation option for her as well. So I appreciate the patience the council brought to that because it has become a major passion project of mine to make sure that we find a good solution for everybody that was there at Geneva Village. And it's hard because rents like that just don't exist, right? So it's quite a transition, and being able to find some tools for them to be able to find a good place to call home that is not only home now, but into the future as well. So I do agree, like there are a lot of, like, there's the real estate side of that, like, ooh, There's the, sort of the
Absolutely.
age of the structures, there's the historic preservation component, there's the affordable housing. There's also, we're seeing, where it's harder to deliver for sale options in Colorado right now. And so is there an opportunity to look at for sale as part of any redevelopment that happens? What are the future plans of the county? Seems like a lot of space. Like, is there a way to support more pedestrian activity? So, and we would never want to make decisions for the county,
No, of
but we
course.
would love to have
This is a
that
quasi-judicial
conversation,
body,
right?
but
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
this is a study session, I personally, as a citizen, I would love to see this property remain in the hands of the city, because I think they're best equipped to be stewards of it. But there's a million things you can do in there. And by the way, nobody's listening to me. But but there's a million things you can do with there without creating some auction and selling it. Like that just seems distasteful. I would love to see something good happen with again.
And I do think that's a major question that we hope the TAP gives us, illuminates some on, because there have been public stewards of real estate that have held in terms of a long-term lease and then created an opportunity through that, but the ownership remains with the city. There have been projects where, the city's been master developer or engaged a partner to do that. Sorry.
Yeah, oh no, I just didn't want to forget my question.
Yeah.
You explained this, but I just want to clarify. So the TAP will be looking at both the areas in pink, or in green and in pink, right?
Mhm.
So there's the Geneva, there's a lot of affordable housing, or there is affordable housing at play here beyond Geneva Village, because does this also include Essex House?
It does include Essex, yeah.
In the pink area?
Essex,
Well.
it is,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
so
it
there's
does.
a lot to consider.
Yeah, because it's that entire sort of where Essex and the retailer there will be part of the study area for the TAP, yeah.
Right. So there's a lot to consider. There's a lot at play.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yes.
So I want to understand exactly what the TAP is, because as you were describing it at first, it sounds like, oh, ULI is this nonprofit organization that provides this amazing service at no cost to a community. You come in, you assemble this great set of experts who tackle the problem that you propose them to help. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is a multi-month study. Where they come in, they do research, they talk to individuals, and then they prepare a report. But then on your last slide, no, it's 2 days. So I must not understand what a TAP really does. It's not a multi-month study, it's a 2-day event.
So it's a 2-day intense, where they're here on site. And so there are a series of stakeholder interviews that are part of that. And then they have one work day where they come up with a set of recommendations. So very fast and furious.
So one
There
day they're
is a-
taking in information from a set of people who are put together by city.
By the city.
You decide who they're gonna hear from on day one.
Yeah.
So that's important, like
Yeah.
how you set that agenda is really influential. And then day 2, they just talk amongst themselves and generate the recommendations.
Yes.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
Also add that they're reviewing a large body of the reports and history and context of the site beforehand, and then they take a couple months to put the report together, I think, so they're not just.
So these 2 days are data gathering, in other words.
Yeah.
What type of background are the people in, like, what type of people would be on the committee that's reviewing all of this? Is it architects? Is it, or like, yeah, what are their backgrounds?
Yeah, I think it varies from panel to panel. But, part of our requests have been, so it may be more of urban design or landscape design versus traditional architecture, but it could be architecture. It could be on the real estate advisory side, historic preservation, people that work in the space of affordable housing. We've also talked with them about those that are really focused on designing for seniors or people with special needs. and what's involved with that. We would anticipate that there might be somebody that maybe brings some Sternberg expertise. And so they'll pull together they really do draw from their members. They volunteer their time. We still do pay a fee. And then we were successful in getting one of only 2 grants in the region through the Denver Regional Council of Governments. So there are 2 grants available, and we thought that this was the right mix of things that both in the region would be useful for other communities to learn from, but then also really leverage some of that expertise that ULI can bring. So again, designed to be fast and furious, and sometimes these can really serve as sort of crazy ideas that then are an opportunity for the community to go, that wouldn't work here. Or sometimes it can be like, I didn't think about that. So, okay, let's have another conversation about that, but let's cross that off the list. We don't want to look at that. So I think it is a great starting point for, sort of unbiased and unfamiliar, other than the research that they've been given, that they come intensely work and then offer this set of recommendations.
Do you off the top of your head, are there other examples of other communities that have used ULI that maybe have taken recommendations or not that we could look at?
Yeah, they have a whole series of them on their website.
Okay.
I think some of the more recent ones, Boulder's worked with them on revitalizing a part of town. I'm trying to think which part of town that was in Boulder. But I think historically it's been some pretty crucial moves of like when the region was talking about really bringing Major League Baseball to town. A ULI tap was integral in deciding where that stadium could be sited. And probably influential in deciding how we would pay for that, right? Like obviously the region shared in the costs of that. Another one is our convention center that's downtown, trying to find a site that was big enough to attract those larger scale conventions, like what is it, American Planning Association's coming at the end of this month, right? So, it's one of those, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Did any of that?
Arvada recently went through, or a couple
Okay.
years ago, I think. And
Yeah.
Evergreen is, the one that did down there is also very interesting, just trying to manage the combination of the wildfire plus flood risk in the historic downtown area. Their website has quite a few, they're pretty interesting to read through.
Yeah.
So nobody's ever done any sketches or sketch site plans or anything?
There was some work from the architect that used to lease space in Geneva Lodge. That was had a long-term lease for a while. Fisher, David Fisher, but then Paul Bryan, his firm, they did do some very high-level conceptual work. So, but nothing that was really ever sought out from the city. Like all of that was, hey, you got a really nice gem here. We did some work with Star Realty, just about understanding, some of the next steps if council were to move in this direction. So trying to think about, and they encouraged us to look at all that the city owns as opposed to just the 2.8 acres that's Geneva Village. So look at it more comprehensively of really how, it's all about resources, right? But if you didn't have resource constraint, what would be the ideal way to really make this entire site work for the community better as a whole? So.
Is Geneva Lodge currently unoccupied?
No, so
People in-
after that long-term lease with the architecture firm, which they outfitted it beautifully, that we were able to take that in as part of our office space needs. So our engineering, public works engineering team is in there now, which it's a beautiful example of craftsman architecture. And it really, I think even the way that they were able to kind of stay true to that, but also create great workspaces for people is a really beautiful space. So if you're
It's a
ever,
designated building.
it is a designated
So
building.
anything that the TAP would recommend that the city would want to pursue would eventually come here.
For just Geneva Lodge.
For the lodge.
Yeah, just the house, if there's any
Right, right, right.
changes to
That's
it,
what I-
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Any other questions? So again, I'll just do that plug, like tonight's about informing you. Then we're hoping that we can engage a couple of you in that consultation process with the TAP. And then if there is an opportunity in your agenda or your schedule and agenda allows for it, we expect to get that report back roughly in July, like late July. So maybe coming back in August and sharing those recommendations, we'd love to make that available to the commission.
What about the agenda for day one of the TAP panel?
We can
Can
share
you
that
see
with
that?
Sarah, yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna try and organize the 5 sessions around the city's long-term outcomes. So you'll see that in the application itself, that we've kind of centered them on those 5 long-term outcomes for the city. So we'll really be looking at how, like, what are the voices that can really share how we reach being a vibrant community with a rich culture. And so that's where we would imagine 2 members of HPC would really fit in, and the robust and resilient economy piece. So as you look at those 5 long-term outcomes, that's kind of how we're organizing around it. Really trying to make sure that we stay true to those larger community goals, as opposed to like just those, because it is, I hear you loud and clear,
That's where-
right? Like it's
That's where
like
the
that-
power is
that-
deciding who they hear from.
Yeah.
That's all the power.
So we're trying to not make that a power dynamic and be very, very conscious of how we craft that, yeah. And then that outreach that we're doing with private property owners, we don't want anybody surprised by this. Like, this is just very high level, very exploratory, and really meant as a first step, not a conclusion.
This has been great, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And your court, everything's wearing green.
It's like there's a holiday.
Almost like there's a
It's like
reason.
there's a, yeah.
Jason, the only non-green is our little row here.
I noticed that, I wasn't gonna say it, but.
The grumpy old man, fail.
The name like Kathleen.
100%.
pinches in, we all get pinched.
Right.
Statler, Waldorf, and
What
Waldorf's
is the matter
brother.
with us? Yeah.
All right, and then we've just got one more topic for the study session, so we will move along to the citywide survey plan kickoff.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Gilbert with Pinion. I'm gonna let Sarah kind of lead things off while I get my computer adapted set up real quick.
Some of this might be a little redundant, but just a couple slides on just a bit of an overview, just so we're all on the same page. So first and foremost, for our survey plan, biggest kind of components of it is understanding the resources and information that we already have, and then kind of utilizing that to start to create a plan for prioritizing future survey work. So there's some reconnaissance level survey that goes along with this, but there's not going to be any kind of major surveys that come out of this. This is our kind of plan that helps us kind of move forward and start kind of prioritizing these various survey areas.
Sarah, the survey plan is not a survey.
Correct, it is a plan to survey things.
Exactly.
Plan to plan.
Kim told the city council like 2 weeks ago that we were gonna have this amazing plan, and I just worry that, remember? Yeah.
Eventually, that would be the goal, there's just a
Correct.
couple steps
Yeah.
prior to that.
Yeah.
This should hopefully help inform that later.
Yes.
She gave the awesome examples of what comes from once you have a very well organized survey plan. So yeah, for our timeline, we're looking at about 12 months. Looking at kind of reviewing some of those existing records and surveys, doing some reconnaissance, research documentation for historic context. The final kind of plan, what we're looking to get out of it is, are those recommendations for that future survey work? Again, doesn't include the full surveys, and then really can be utilized as a tool to inform a future preservation plan. That's often a recommendation that comes out of preservation plans that kind of sets you up So this is kind of we're taking this step and doing it beforehand to kind of keep that momentum going before we get to do an actual preservation plan. But I'm gonna hand it over. I'm sure you'll talk about some of the research that's already been done. so
Absolutely,
that's-
yeah.
Didn't wanna get into that too much, so I'm gonna switch.
And we're still very early in
Computers.
our research phase, but we've been gathering data.
So are you the consultant the city
Yes.
hired?
Yes, so I am a historian with Pinion Environmental. Just some background for me, I was born in Lakewood and then lived most of my life in Littleton, Colorado, just outside the incorporated boundary, so just west of it. The dividing line was in the street right in front of my house, so right on South Sheridan Boulevard, so.
At least we have someone who knows that there's an incorporated and an
Yep,
unincorporated.
exactly. So I spent most of my life out in unincorporated Littleton, which I also find to be an interesting avenue of potential future inquiry, but I know that this is mostly focused on within the incorporated limits. I did my bachelor's degree up at Colorado State University, got my bachelor's in history and political science, double major, and then went back for my master's degree at Colorado State University and got a master's degree in historic preservation. Yeah, and then I've been with Pinion for about 5 years now, so it's an interesting industry and it's a cool way to, I always loved history and never really thought there was anything to it other than teaching. So I found a cool little niche that it's a bigger industry than a lot of people think. So just to start off, so here is the incorporated boundary of Littleton. And just wanted to kind of explore some of the data that we've been finding so far. I've got a preliminary list of potential properties for the reconnaissance survey. And then also just want to get the members' ideas on additional historic context studies if there's any that we're missing, so.
How did you come up with that first list of reconnaissance?
I think that was provided to us in the RFP, and we're also we're gathering data from the State Historic Preservation Office on previous Section 106 projects that have happened within the study area. We're still waiting on a lot of that data to come back, and the State Historic Preservation Office is greatly overloaded and understaffed currently,
So
so,
these are non-designated properties?
yes.
But that may have historical value?
Yep, and
is
so
that
that's
how-
what we're focusing on is, in the initial kickoff meeting with Sarah and the planning department.
Yeah, Jesse as well.
Yeah.
Was with us.
Jesse?
I'm not
Jared.
sure,
Oh,
but-
okay. Apologies.
Here's another J name.
Okay. In the
It's a fun spot.
In the initial kickoff meeting, they had mentioned that some of the emphasis that they kind of wanted to see was maybe investigating some of the multi-unit housing or post-World War II, like mid-century to late 20th century apartment complexes, multi-family housing. That is an avenue of inquiry that in my research so far, it has not been greatly explored. It's mentioned in a few of the historic contexts, but a lot of those were done. Like the one that talked the most about it was the citywide survey context report from 2001. And at the time, a lot of the apartment complexes were not of age to be considered historic. And since that time now, a lot of them are coming of that age, so.
And part of that, just so y'all kind of know, part of that direction was also from a grant that I think staff and the HPC kind of put together to receive from the Arts and Culture Board and kind of trying to figure out to take that grant and kind of still be able to utilize those funds for this project as well and kind of mirroring those. And it did kind of call out specifically wanting to understand more about that kind of mid-century multifamily. So we wanted to make sure that it was still in line with that grant while then also expanding it to be a citywide survey kind of project. So that's where some of that came from.
So, as you can see here, we've got the red boundary, that's the incorporated boundaries, and then there's this one weird little spit over here. That is a modern subdivision, not historic, so we kind of focused mostly on Arapahoe County is most of where the data is currently that we've got. And as you guys know, most of it is within Arapahoe County, so. This next layer that I'm gonna pull up will show the previous surveys that have been done. So this is the orange there was the boundary of the Littleton citywide historic context study back in 2001 and 2002. They did not evaluate every building within that boundary, but a good portion of them, as you will see this next layer that I'm about to turn on, which is all of the previously surveyed things that are within the State Historic Preservation Office's database. And so you can see like there's a lot, especially down along Littleton Boulevard, a lot of those main thoroughfares down in downtown Littleton. But outside of those areas, there, even within this orange boundary, there's several areas that have been unexplored. And then I'll turn that layer off really quick. And one really cool thing that we've been playing around with is we took a bunch of data from the Arapahoe County Assessor and color-coded parcels by dates of construction. And it kind of just shows you a pretty interesting transformation of how the city has grown over time. So I'll turn off all the layers except for 1890. And there are very few left, if any. I'm sure there are some somewhere in here, but they're kind of tough to see. Yep, there's actually a couple right down here. And then just going forward, you can really see the progression of the growth of Littleton over the course of the first half of the 20th century. And then it really, really blows up, as I'm sure you all know, in the post-World War II period, which is kind of why we wanted to focus on that. And I think in addition to both the multifamily housing, there is a real potential for future investigation into the single family housing as well in Littleton. A lot of the previous historic context reports have been focused on commercial resources, and not so much attention has been paid to the post-World War II residential housing stock of the city. So yeah, it was just an interesting way to visualize the data. Just wanted to share that with the commission, and then using all of that data, I came up with a very preliminary list of potential places to survey for the reconnaissance survey, primarily consisting of multifamily housing, apartment complexes, duplexes, stuff like that. There's also an interesting opportunity for, and I know it's not the most glamorous resource, but trailer courts are actually one of the resources that has been not investigated in the past, and there's a lot more emphasis on looking at those types of resources, the low income to middle income housing. And this, in my opinion, just looking at it from the air, is a quintessentially designed mid-century trailer court, and it might be a pretty cool resource to look at as well. So that's one of the single family ideas that I had. And then the other one, take it or leave it, but since I grew up right across the street from it, it's got a special place in my heart, Beaumar South, but that would be another interesting one of single family homes where it's mid-century. They've got a lot of really cool architectural styles in there from the mid-century, and might be interesting. But getting on to multifamily housing, turn off Beaumar South, Castler, and Meadowood. And we've got a couple of clusters that, as you can see here, and some of them are actually even within the area that was in the citywide historic context. So we'll start there. Over on towards the eastern side of West Littleton Boulevard, right there by Broadway, there is a large apartment complex that, from my reading of it, just from the air and from what I've seen on Street View, they were all originally built as part of one apartment complex. It's got a central design. I think there's a pool somewhere in here that it seems like a pretty mid-century design for one apartment complex, and then it was subdivided into multiple different apartment complexes over the years. However, even though a lot of them have been changed, they still retain a lot of their character, I guess. And you can just kind of see how the buildings, like here's one that's been updated, and they've all received a certain degree of updates, but they still retain that original design with the large corners and the entry vestibules and everything like that. Moving on to a couple, and feel free to interrupt me at any time if anybody has any questions. This is more of just an interactive session, but I am known to be a talker, so. There's that area right there, and then close by, there are a bunch of multifamily duplexes and small apartment complexes or small apartment buildings. That would be another interesting one. And almost all of the ones that I saw were from the 1960s and 1970s. So it would be just at the end of that post-war period and starting into that new, or into the end of the 20th century, which is a topic that historians have not really looked at too much. Yeah.
Did you capture there are a couple apartment buildings on the south side of Littleton Boulevard?
Okay.
Like behind King Soopers?
Yes, yeah,
Right
exactly.
down here?
They're architecturally interesting.
They are really cool.
Are these the ones you're talking about right here? Yeah. Yep, and so I did look at those, and that's some of the other ones that I flagged there. There's an interesting mix here, because they were all built around the same time, but just looking at the roofs, you can see that they're not the same between, it seems like the most that are the same are two buildings. So that would be an interesting area.
I'm thinking of the ones on Broadmoor Drive, the Flamingo, what street is that one? It's the interesting one.
Pop us down into street view somewhere over here.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, this is a really cool looking one with the
Oh, I
breeze.
didn't know that was called the Flamingo.
It's not anymore.
Yeah.
It was years and
Used to
years
drive by it every day
Breeze
on the
Soleil,
east.
the breeze block and everything, this is
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah,
That would be,
Nicole and.
yeah,
it's
that's
of
awesome.
interest.
So this is perfect, this is exactly what we're looking for,
But
is just,
it's of the Littleton Boulevard Mid-Mod style.
yep, exactly. And as far as I know, let's double check, but let's go with that layer. Yep, not surveyed.
There's a couple over on Gallup too,
Yes,
behind Lowe's Coffee.
yes, those would be
Just
interesting.
west.
It's like Gallup
Face
and Littleton
west.
Boulevard, just south of Littleton Boulevard.
Oh, right here.
Face west.
I don't know what the dates on those are. I would guess that they're older.
I can tell you now. That would be 1950s, I think, maybe 1960s, 1961. I will put a police mark down on that as well. Let's see, some of the other ones that I identified just on a cursory look around town. Going down towards the southern end, down towards, what is that, Ridge Road and Broadway. There's a couple of apartment complexes in here that seemed interesting. The Amityville, not Amityville, Amity,
That would be
apologies.
scary.
Apologies. It was built in 1978, so it's not,
Oh, okay,
not
so it's
quite.
close.
It's getting to that point, which is partly why we're doing this, is to identify things that are coming of age, or will be coming of age within the next 5-10 years, and try to give you that preliminary baseline data.
The shopping center. was
Sorry.
in-
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the shopping center would have been the 1960s, I think.
This shopping center right here,
Yeah.
that was 1978, and then later. So we did not include anything after, that was constructed after 1979, so 1980 and later is not included in this data.
Interesting. Seems like that's always been there. You would know more than me.
I remember shopping at Betsy.
And
It was a
it's
Safeway.
it's
I
one
didn't
thing
know
I
it was
love
the
about
fabric
this, is
store.
like, as a
Yeah.
hometown kid,
Sure.
I never, and it's the age-old adage of like general contractor's house always needs the most work. I grew up in this, I grew up in this area, but I didn't realize how much of the history I did not know. And so I'm learning a lot about my hometown. That is fantastic. It's really cool.
Welcome to the club.
I went down a rabbit hole earlier today, and yeah.
Just to go back a little bit north too, there are some on the west side of Kettering
Okay.
on Gallup too, like in between Kettering Park and Bemis Library. I don't know how old those are, but those seem old-ish, probably 70s.
You said it was north of Littleton Boulevard?
South of Littleton Boulevard,
Where was Gallup?
and yeah, if you take Shepherd over
Oh.
to the west. And then that's Gallup, and then go down a little bit to the south. Oh yeah, it looks like you do have those pinned
Yep.
there too.
So that is the next area I was looking at. And this one actually looked really cool because it's got that central pool, the U-shaped buildings, and then I guess one L-shaped building, but that would be a really interesting one. And again, there's some of these smaller duplexes, apartment buildings, there's kind of a mix in there.
Where are we now?
This is at
Just across from Kettering, do you know where, like, where the Littleton Museum is the
Yeah.
kind of catty corner to the south
Just
east?
to the north of the library, it looks like.
Yeah, so like, I believe this is the museum, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Right
Okay,
here.
got it.
So just northwest of the museum.
What about the one that's over by Stern Park that's just like the long, low building? Do you know what I'm talking about, Amy? It's like that, it's just like a long, low building of just like,
Which direction off the park?
south of the park on Stern
Oh,
Parkway.
yes.
That, I've always been so interested in that building.
1960s,
Yeah.
I would think.
Apologies, I know all the parks in unincorporated Littleton, but.
Okay,
all
so
these
see this,
Incorporated ones, so you said it
so
was where?
Stern Park and see this like diagonal road?
Right
And
here?
it's- Yeah, and then if you scroll in on that, like, there's like a
Back toward
long,
the park.
Oh, right here.
well,
Okay.
yeah, there's those ones, and then there's the long, low, if like you keep going
They're
down
like
the.
cedar shake, right?
Bottom of
Uh-huh.
your screen there. That might
Oh,
be-
that's a
That,
building.
yeah,
I thought that was one of my polygons from my.
and it's all just like single, it's like, it almost looks like a motel, but it's like
Right.
connected homes.
2-story?
No, just one story.
Is it a Sternberg?
Oh, it's a Sternberg?
So that would be a very good candidate.
If we're losing Geneva Village, we gamble better keep
Oh,
that.
wow, look at that.
It's so cool.
That is a really cool one.
Sometimes I just drive down Stern Parkway just to drive by that building.
So yeah, we can.
That's never been surveyed?
I don't believe so. Let's double check that.
Those like have single floor attached and it's kind of.
Does not appear so unless it was included within one of these polygons. These big circles are kind of old outdated data and they didn't really map them the greatest back in the 1990s and early 2000s. So we could always pull that survey report and see if that's been surveyed. If not, I think that would be a very ideal candidate.
Just to the south of that too, there's a bunch of like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. I don't know what the age of them is, but
Is
that's.
that down in this
Uh-huh.
area?
Yeah, and,
Okay.
yeah, on the other side of Park Hill too.
Yeah, along Prince and Kaylee.
So good at this.
So this is exactly what we were looking for.
It's really good.
Some
I
some
never take the
ideas
fast
from.
way home.
Yeah, cause like I was looking at it on Google Earth today and just from my knowledge of the area and it's like, oh, I know there's an apartment complex over here and, but you guys are coming up with some really good suggestions, so.
There's some at Powers and Bannock,
Powers and
just
Bannock, okay.
east, just west of Broadway and north
Yeah.
of Littleton Boulevard. I don't know if those were captured or not.
Go, there you go. Just to the northeast of where you're at, that.
Oh, right
Is that not? Okay, yeah, that was, yeah.
Oh,
those-
yeah. And they have that.
I think they're super cool. They
Yeah.
all have little names too. I just,
Cute.
I enjoyed that one massively.
Google Street View up there. Oh, you were.
So you can kind of see on the signs, like, there's a
Oh, wow.
Prince Charles, Queen Elizabeth, they're just kind of fascinating.
Seriously? Prince Charles?
I think it was,
Yeah. It's like Queen Elizabeth just there.
It should be Princess Diana.
Prince
I'll bet there is
Charles.
one in there.
Pre-Diana.
That is true.
Yeah, probably, you're right.
But maybe we could recommend a name change.
But yeah, so
Those ones are cool.
That's another good one.
Definitely worth searching.
selfishly, I'm
Okay.
intrigued by those.
Some other ones that I found, let's see, the Windermere Apartments. This one seemed interesting. It was built in 1972.
Oh, yeah. What is the, it's a senior home.
Senior apartments.
Yeah.
Is it senior housing now?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it wasn't always,
Yeah.
but it was.
I've watched them go up that hill on their little electric scooters.
Yes.
And so that, I think that would be another interesting one.
Junior high in Grant and look out at those balconies.
Fox and a Lottie
Uh-huh.
apartments, which,
Yeah.
I felt that way about the apartments in downtown Littleton when they first built them. I really wanted to live there.
are you talking about the ones over on, what is that, Prince Street?
Well, the ones on Main Street that are up above
Oh, okay,
the, yeah.
those are.
Yeah.
I was a kid when those were built and it was very cool.
This is another interesting one. These apartments were actually called out in several of the historic contexts. I believe they were, some of them were Sternberg design. And they are supposedly the first apartment, one of these, I think it's the Fox Street Apartments, was supposedly the first apartment building in the city. Interestingly, there has not been a survey of them, even though they're mentioned in the historic context reports, and that just kind of shows you where their focus on was for those context reports. Even though they mention it, have a whole section dedicated, or a paragraph or two dedicated to it, they never actually surveyed it. So that would be another interesting one. There's some,
Are those, is that Norgren there, that building?
Just to the east, yes.
Okay.
That's Northern.
Okay.
and so I'll just pop us into.
Northern, and there's actually the school.
The school, yeah, Littleton
That's probably the
Pepper
school.
Charter, yeah.
And so there's just kind of an interesting mix of Neomancer
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
these ones are a little bit more simple, but architectural history, sometimes the simple resources can actually tell you the most, especially about communities that have typically been ignored by historic studies, so. Yeah, and I can keep going through this list. There's,
Besides multi-unit or multifamily, what else are we?
and so that's the direction that I was given, was for the reconnaissance survey, the city wanted to focus on these multifamily and lower income, and that's especially
that
because a
reason,
lot of the
right?
previous surveys have focused on the commercial and industrial resources of Littleton.
Yeah.
We also have all the Section 106 projects focused on transportation, railroads, irrigation, stuff like that. And not enough attention has been paid to especially multifamily housing. That said, as part of the survey plan, we would be giving recommendations for future areas of survey. And I've just, in doing some preliminary research, I've identified a few areas where I think that there could be some future avenues of inquiry. Mid-century housing from like the mid-1960s onward of single-family homes, especially those lower to middle income housing, particularly, where was it? The Castler subdivision. This is over at Bowles. It's just right next to that Gino's Auto place on Bowles. Back behind,
Yeah.
The nursing home.
By Skate City, right?
and-
I believe so.
Yeah.
Am I
There's some
looking for-
duplexes over there too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Didn't that all flood in 65 and then they?
I'm sure it did. Yeah, there was, that flood impacted quite a bit. I think another interesting avenue of inquiry would be just because I found the history of the annexations into the city of Littleton to be very interesting, and I was curious why there's this huge unincorporated area, and a lot of that development happened in the 1970s and later. And I think that that's a pretty good area for future historic inquiry, because there are a lot of people that call themselves Littletonians, Littletonites, living
I say
out.
Littletonians.
Yeah, I've seen it written both ways, and so, yeah, that would be another interesting one, but again, those are just a few of my off-the-cuff preliminary thoughts.
But before we get into, help us understand how this reconnaissance survey you're doing then feeds into the process of the survey plan.
Yes,
And with that, are we only looking at non-surveyed properties?
we
as part of the
don't,
survey
not
plan?
necessarily, and so I think we have it in our
I
scope
need to
to,
understand better
we have it
the
in our scope to
process.
look at, I think up to 5 previously evaluated resources. This is also just a context, or a reconnaissance survey, so these site forms would not be robust in any nature. It would be more just to inform, that report and then future efforts. So here's just kind of our scope that we've got. We're currently scoped for up to 15, 14, 17 recon site forms, and then 5 revisitation site forms. And so it's kind of up to the city as to if they've got some recommendations on what they would like resurveyed. We wouldn't be able to change any of these determinations of eligibility with this, but it would at least maybe give you an idea. Maybe there's a resource that the commission really feels has lost integrity, and they would like us to revisit it and get some preliminary information on that to maybe give a recommendation for a full evaluation. Or if you have things that maybe you feel that the previous determination of eligibility was incorrect and you'd like us to maybe look into that, we can at least provide a recommendation like, yeah, they've missed a lot and this would be worth pursuing further.
When this came up in our previous study session with the city council a couple weeks ago, after Sarah's presentation, the mayor said, "So where do you think you want to designate?" and sort of looked at us as if this was going to be sort of a straight through line to designation.
No, not necessarily.
So we ought to be talking about that,
Yeah.
because if the mayor has a misunderstanding of what this process is, we probably ought to clarify that.
Correct, yes.
And the rest of the city council, and it gets to this point about a lot of stuff has already been surveyed. Just as an example, I live in Arapahoe Hills, it's
Okay.
National Register listed, but there's been a lot of talk over the years whether the city ought to list it too.
Okay.
Or designate it too. How does that conversation fit into this process, or does it not fit
It
into
does,
this?
and so that's why part of this process would be reviewing all of the previous historic contexts that have been completed within the city limits. One of those is actually the Arapahoe Hills Reconnaissance Survey done in 2009. It's a historic district, and so that could be one of those resources that if the city or if the commission so wishes, we could make that one of the ones that we maybe revisit for to relook at it and maybe provide a recommendation for local designation. But yeah, that is part of, the reconnaissance survey will kind of inform our idea of what is missing from the other historic contexts. So we'll be doing that kind of concurrently, but yeah.
So all 15 of the reconnaissance survey properties should not be multifamily. If that's all the reconnaissance survey is looking at, should it only exclusively look at multifamily?
Correct, ideally. Ideally, if we're doing a reconnaissance survey, we would want it to be a focused reconnaissance survey. So a reconnaissance survey of multifamily housing. If we wanted to do that on single-family subdivisions, we could do that.
So has city staff already made that decision?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what they're saying.
Yeah, but they're not saying. So
I
I'm
can't
trying to
give that
figure out.
answer. I don't know if
You
they've
just
made
want
the,
a yes or
There-
no, that's all you want.
I don't know if they've made that decision or not.
I
Yes.
have not made that, we have not made that kind of final decision by any means, it was kind of building off of
And
some
I
of the
don't have a
previous
problem
work.
with it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
and
sort
so,
of
yeah, it
figuring
was
out
trying
how
to
we
kind
fit
of,
Just yes
into
or no,
this.
guys.
yeah,
Just yes
so
or no, and we will zip it.
I was building off of kind of previous work that the HPC had done. If there is interest in other things.
And that's why we're here.
That is totally fine, we do not have to do solely the multifamily, I think that is definitely an opportunity and we should have some focus on it. But we can definitely, if there are resources that we do want that are outside of that, let us know.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and it's
And that's
kind
kind
of
of
where we're at.
why I'm here is to
Yeah.
just gauge the commission's ideas about this and if they had any other recommendations, so.
So what do you think about that idea?
I mean, I like the multifamily housing. I do think we have a lot of single-family housing that is out there that I don't think people know or recognize. Like, Mayor mentioned Aberdeen Village. I think that's a big one.
Another one I noticed earlier today was just to the east of Arapahoe Village over here, this subdivision, this is all 1950s housing that was worker housing and it is unsurveyed. And so that would be another interesting single-family neighborhood to maybe do a.
There's some single-family housing north of Littleton Boulevard too,
Okay.
that has some mid-mod stuff.
Yep.
And then also like some, I think, maybe more 40s kind of
Yeah, and
things too.
I guess most of that has been surveyed
Okay.
previously. And so that's why I kind of shied away from the
Yeah.
downtown area.
What about Aberdeen Village, going back
I
to
think
your
those
first
apartment,
recommendation?
the ones on Main Street and the ones, the Princess and
Yeah.
Queen, those are cool, but then Aberdeen Village I think is great, cause
Yeah.
the people are gonna move in there and they're gonna change them.
And it's already happening.
Yeah, so like tops are getting popped and.
The other one too, and it has already changed a lot,
It's not there.
but
So-
Front Range Road.
It's kind of,
Yes.
Would that be the correct one? Just east
of the lake,
But that apartment building you pointed out, that's like off of like Ridge and
just east of that.
Windermere, where is
Aberdeen
that? On the side street, the
Oh,
diagonal.
It's
uh-huh.
one of
I live right by there, I've
road
never
work
seen
it's
it, I'm
called.
gonna
It's
drive
that
by
area.
it
You
on my way home.
It's great.
It's low and.
Yeah,
Is
I
Aberdeen
saw
Village,
it in the
does it
picture.
dip like to
Kettering.
Littleton Boulevard or was that Broadmoor? The original?
It wasn't.
Aberdeen Village, so there's like the Kettering Park Lake, and then there's two
Trying
kind
to
of,
find it.
yeah, so it's Lakeview, and then, Aberdeen,
It's
there's
like
Park
that.
Hill, yeah. Yep.
from there and to the yellow line.
And, well, Arbor Avenue is kind of the,
Is that this one right here?
Yeah.
Although if we're focusing already on this mid-century, I wonder if it'd be
And we can
worth
get
it
the
to
boundaries
grab-
nailed down if that's something.
Yeah, there's signs.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm thinking of like lots on streets that are really typical, like, think of along Peakview, just west of Broadway, that
Mhm.
it's like really typical, kind of middle class, like, all these these workers and engineers moving to Littleton to work at Marathon,
Mhm.
built these houses.
Mhm.
They tell a story.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's right.
that's another thing that I was noticing is on top of the lack of investigation into multifamily housing. A lot of the mid-century housing for single families also was not necessarily investigated in previous reports because it probably wasn't old enough at the time.
Yeah, so just to get it captured in a survey, I think.
Yeah, and so that would be something that like we could either investigate in this one or we would include that as one of our future recommendations.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Sorry, Front Range Road would be the other one. And that one has changed a lot, so I don't know.
Where's Front Range?
Southwest of where you're at right now.
Yeah, so go down
Mostly
Windermere.
south, keep going south. And then,
Rose Ridge Road.
Yeah, keep going south.
there's the high school, so just west.
Yeah, just west.
There you
And
go.
it's this little loop here.
This one right here? Ah,
Mhm. And then it has this like, it goes over and there's a dead end and then there's the loop. And it would be all those houses in there.
so that would be an interesting one. It looks like there's a bunch
A
of
lot
new,
have
new
changed.
custom one out in the
Yes.
middle, but it does look like there's a pretty good range of historic houses
What
around
does
there.
the green splotch mean on the north side of?
That is, I believe, 1960s construction. 1950s.
But are there a lot of properties under that splotch or just one big property?
They're really big properties. They have large lots,
Oh,
yeah.
I see, thank you.
Those are only two, yeah.
They were probably built around the same time as Columbine Country Club houses.
Uh-huh, like the
Same
1960s.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, so like they've changed a little bit, but some of them have kind of retained. There's some really cool ones if you go around the corner from there too.
That almost looks like a Beaumont.
It is.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot of the same buildings.
Yeah, this would be another interesting area. And so,
Yeah, again, to tell a story of development. I love that neighborhood.
I walk around it all the time.
You walk.
Yeah, oh yeah, because my mom lives on the other side of that.
There's like a house that has like a castle looking thing.
Yes.
Yes, so some lady owns it. I also went up and knocked on the big house's front door, like the
The
lodge.
one that bothers you so much?
Huh?
The one on Prince that bothers you so much?
Oh, I went up and knocked,
Should we put that in the
probably.
reconnaissance?
No, you can't say that.
Oh. He doesn't watch this.
Those are my ideas right off the top of my head. I'm
Okay.
sure I can think
Those are
I'm
great.
sure I can think of more.
We should be done.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's my bedtime.
Yeah.
does anybody have any other recommendations, ideas, thoughts for where they would really like us to focus?
The other idea that we had talked about a couple of years ago, and this would, I think, be another survey, reconnaissance survey, but we have some really cool, like, mid-mod churches around that have, like, really cool architecture, and that might be another interesting one to take a
Not
look
only
at.
churches, but grocery stores too. I've noticed that.
Or what's left of them.
Well, yeah, like
I mean,
this,
they're no-
the
a lot of
Arc,
them are no longer grocery stores,
Yeah.
But
but
yeah, Arc and.
yeah, the Arc used to be a Safeway.
the gymnastics
I saw a
place.
historic photo
Yeah.
of that. And it actually still retains quite a bit of character.
Ranky Brothers used to be a grocery.
It did, the
Ranky
Linky.
Brothers, I haven't thought about that place in years.
You should go, it's the
Oh, it's
best.
It's great. I haven't been there since I was a kid, but
We did the lights on Haunted House tour this year and that was
Okay.
cool.
nice.
Okay,
They
so-
reveal all their tricks.
I'm the process guy apparently. So our chair says, hey, what about churches?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's cool. What about grocery stores? How does this get
So this is
woven
all just
into
kind of
a
gonna,
process?
a lot of these ideas will
So it
actually,
doesn't just fly away
a
and
lot of these ideas will inform, they'll probably be included in the future areas of inquiry, in our survey plan, maybe some recommendations for next steps. You guys have come to the table with a lot of ideas, more than we can handle within the context of, within
Yes.
But this is a plan and survey.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
not a
And
survey.
so that's the
Right.
purpose of this, was to get some of those ideas so that we
Right.
know what you guys want to see, because ideally this should be your history, because you are or the city's history, and
So now can we count on, the chair has said, hey, let's look at some point, churches. Can we count on the survey plan mentioning churches?
Yes.
Okay.
End of
Yes.
statement, yes or no? Good
yes.
job.
And then when will we be factored in again?
That is a good question. I think we are scoped for several meetings. Yeah, I believe so.
We did technically start in January.
Yes.
Oh, we did, okay, well.
And we've been,
To
we've
get
been
the-
gathering.
Gathering information,
Gather-
staff has
gathering
met and
data.
they're
So
gathering
we've got the
data.
rest of the year.
Yep,
Yes.
exactly.
We had
And so as soon as we get some direction on what we're like the recon survey, we can get started with that. We can start going through and annotating the historic context surveys and start pulling together that survey plan, so.
You may have said that, like what, I know in the past, the commission or the HPP at the time did what we called windshield surveys where, you know, we were able to help out, even though we weren't credit experts like you, just at least to determine is the building still there, does it look the same, like, will you be asking us to do any of that work, or does this all?
If the commission would like to, we would love to keep that, we would love to keep everyone as involved as as they feel comfortable with or as they would like to be. If you guys want nothing to do with it, you can just set us loose and we'll do it. If you would like to be involved, we would be more than happy to.
Where would that fit in your scope of work?
Probably within our reconnaissance survey, you guys could come out and help with that.
Maybe we table that for another
Yeah.
night.
We also, the original grant, talked about purchasing some tablets that, and we've been working on the software and had to kind of pivot a little bit away from the original plan for the software, so IT, we're working with IT on that. So we should have some resources available in the future as well to be able to conduct some of these.
And if those resources aren't available and commission members would like to come out, we do have extra tablets that we can supply to the commission at least to use for the survey, so.
I'm thinking about it. Can we get access to like the map thing that you did with the times of when things
Yeah,
were built?
absolutely. I
So that
can-
we could like
I think
target?
I already sent that along and.
Yeah, I can email y'all out the digital file.
That
I
would be
just did the
cool,
kind
yeah.
of flat images
It's a
of
lot of
everything.
data and
That's
Yeah.
a
if
file,
you,
that's not online.
no, not currently. I mean, so the construction dates, we actually ended up having to create our own layer because Arapahoe County doesn't have any of that like graphically.
No,
So
so manually, didn't
we had to have our GIS person go through and he luckily is a wizard with it and was able to marry two massive Excel spreadsheets of data and got it to come together.
That
Wow.
was fun times.
He's really good at what he does and he saved me a lot of time, or one of our interns, a lot of time.
And it is through, I think you can access this Google Earth online.
Yes.
But these are technically Google Earth files, so they're a little bit
the data
different, which is
overlays
why.
you.
Exactly, and
I
so
get
what you
the
can
flat
do is you
copies.
can, the best way to view, if you guys want to get this data or data on your own computer, download Google Earth Pro on the internet, it's free. And then the data will come in KNZ file format, which you can just open up in here and it gets really clunky if you have everything loaded at the same time. So I'll just show you, for instance, let's turn everything off and then turn everything back on. And it just gets a little busy and Google Earth does not really like it.
Okay.
I torture my Google Earth with way too many layers anyway, so it's used to it.
Okay.
Other questions? Perfect. Well, thank you all for your time. This has been greatly helpful and
It's very helpful.
What's your name again?
what's that?
What's your name again?
Dan Gilbert.
Dan.
Yep, and I can actually,
Thank you, Dan.
yeah,
Great.
I can pass around business cards if you want.
Great.
I'm sure Sarah would love it if we started just single.
Maybe CC me?
Right? Yeah, let's keep Sarah CC'd on.
Sarah, Dan and I have been chatting for months about.
We changed the entire project.
I feel like a city attorney or city clerk might get annoyed with me if that happens.
We had a meeting with it.
Go through Sarah.
Yeah, they didn't show up, so it doesn't matter.
But this has been greatly helpful. We'll be in touch with Sarah with a preliminary list and maybe at the next mission.
We either am about to die.
Running on coffee.
Feel free to, I'm not sure how it'll get used, but if you have other ideas that pop up,
Yes.
always feel free to email me and I can pass them along as needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys. Sorry, Jason just has one question, then I was wondering if I could just say 2 housekeeping things
Yes.
quickly. Okay.
So picking up again on the joint study session we had, that whole conversation about the Littleton Boulevard contract, Kalina insisting that we have say over who gets hired, that was not applauded. But, so how are we going to be factored into, or again, a process question about,
Yeah,
you know, we were sort of said, don't call us, we'll call you. But now is the time to follow up with you to say, okay.
We'd like to call some people.
so we don't have everything finalized yet, so I will say a little bit of grain of salt or like things can shift, but right now we have the kind of 3 primary city groups, our city council, planning commission, historic preservation commission, that will be engaged fairly directly.
Did you hire a firm?
Not yet, that's why I'm saying it's still kind of
Do we need to
nebulous, we're
interview
still finalizing
We're
it.
finalizing procurement currently.
Do you have one that you're working like
Please.
toward?
The process has
Getting a
concluded
yes or no
with,
good answer.
Yeah, yes or no? That's all.
We are not at a point where we can,
That's not a yes or no.
we can
Fair enough.
talk about it, kind
Fair
of.
enough.
Too soon.
Sorry.
Go back to you.
that is,
That's kind of where we're at, we are,
So no,
it's just our kind of requirements, we can't
Understood.
talk super
Understood.
publicly. But the HPC is going to be a large stakeholder in this process.
it's not even yes or no, it's a secret.
Fair, this is a public meeting, that's fair.
to be rolled out.
No, it's
Yeah.
huge.
But you have said, we are one of 3 bodies that will be, what'd you call it, a major player?
More like, yes, we will be engaging multiple of our boards and commissions within the city. We did specifically call out though, engagement with city council, planning commission and historic preservation commission in addition to all of our stakeholder engagement. Understanding that you guys are kind of the 3 primary council commissions that kind of will play a major role in kind of the
So we're
process.
in bold and it's.
So because we are hearing it all the time, that there are historical assets there, and this is the time to speak up and, you know, so.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the intent is for historic preservation to be one of the 5 pillars of the plan.
Yep.
And so, on par with all the other 4. So we completely agree that there are a lot of historic assets. They've been looked at in the past, but it's developing the plan around action moving forward. That's what we'd like to accomplish with this plan.
Great. Okay, just 2 housekeeping things. I know she's not here, but today is technically Kim's last meeting, so I just wanted to say thank you to Kim. I know she was on the board for 9 years. She was on, 3 different terms, and I know I have learned a lot from her, and she was great to work with, and she'll be missed. Yes, hopefully she's watching. She's probably taking a break, but you never know. With that too, next meeting is the beginning of a new kind of HPC term. So if anyone is interested in being chair or vice chair, I think just kind of start thinking about that.
Oh, we do
So we'll
elections again?
yeah, so we'll elect, will we get a new member?
I believe, yeah, we had an
It
opening
was-
for one new.
I'm officially a full member as of next month.
So we'll have an alternate.
Another
then.
alternate.
Because, yep, exactly, we'll have a new alternate as Jason will step up into a full member or whatever terminology we want to put there.
Sure.
But yes, the appointments were indicated at the March 4th city council meeting.
Okay, so we can hop online and take a look at those if we want, but just something to consider over the next month if anybody is interested.
being chair or.
Do we have to go through training again? Is there training?
Yeah, I
That's
think
also-
there's training, there's just like board member training every year too, so I'm sure we'll get
It's so
some
fun.
more information about that, but just wanted to put a
We'll be
bug in everyone's
contacted
ear.
shortly.
Should be the April meeting.
Yes, yeah. All right, I will adjourn the meeting.
Yay.
Thank you.